Sure. All right, welcome everyone to our December 5th Early Childhood Education Development Committee meeting. I see that we have more than quorum, so thank you all for being present with us today, our last meeting of 2023. So let's go ahead and two immediate items. I'll start with the minutes. Has everyone had a chance to review the November 7th meeting minutes? If so, I'll entertain a motion to approve.
So moved.
Second.
Motion and second, any discussion? If not, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Excellent. Before we jump into old business, I understand there is one kind of time-sensitive issue that I wanted to just immediately jump into, so we're addressing it. Rachel can give a little bit more of a preview for what that is, but it's going to require a unanimous vote to add an item to our agenda. So to the extent anyone has concerns, please let's chat about it before you vote against hearing it. But it's extremely time sensitive, given this is going to impact a lot of our local folks.
So the agenda item is Valley Child Development Center, and there was an email that went from Angela to the committee yesterday afternoon with a letter of funding request.
Has everyone received that?
Yes.
Perfect. This,
Mark, Rachel, is it possible to draw those blinds a little bit?
Yep, I got it.
So glared out there, see your loving faces.
Yeah, thanks for asking.
so it's strictly as to whether or not folks are okay adding that to our agenda to speak about. Is everyone roughly on board with that?
Yes.
Okay, then I'll make a motion that we add to our agenda discussion of the Early Childhood Center here.
Second.
Any discussion? If not, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. Would you like to handle that after old business or just right off the bat? Let's jump into that.
Your preference.
I'd say since we want to have as much time as possible and give some clear direction, maybe even during this meeting, let's start with that.
Sure. So hello, everyone. Rachel Sawyer Nygaard here. I'm getting a copy of the letter on my screen so that I can make sure I'm speaking clearly. We mentioned this briefly in the announcements during the last meeting, that it was something to have on the radar screen, and in fact, it is on our plate for consideration. The Valley Child Development Center is an early learning program, a child care center that's operated on the campus of Community High School in Swannanoa on Old 70. And the operator of the child care center is Southwest Child Development Center. They have been operating Valley Child since 2014. I actually did a little bit of digging and researching and learned that Buncombe County was the previous operator. County government had previously been operating the child care center in that location. Southwestern Child Development Center closed 7 other regional child care centers earlier this fall as a result of funding hardship. They had specifically called out the subsidy reimbursement rates not being adequate to cover the true cost of care. But in summary, financial hardship was the reason for the closure. We weren't sure what was going to happen with the Buncombe-based center, and now we know that their plan is to close that center, cease operations as of January 1st. So essentially operated through December. Buncombe County Schools, and I want to acknowledge we do have a guest in the room from Buncombe County Schools, Jennifer Reed, Associate Superintendent. Dr. Reed, thank you for being here. It has an interest in keeping the child care center open and operational, as we do, as the county. The specific interest of Buncombe County Schools, having it co-located with the high school, allows the center to serve the target populations that they do serve, which is teen parents, so enrolled high school students, as well as foster parents. Buncombe County School staff or faculty also have children within the center. It's a center that has a license, a 4-star license from the state, DCDEE, for approved for up to 50 children, and their current enrollment is 45. And of that 45 kids, 34 are voucher, so that child care subsidy program. And the remainder are private pay. Southwest Child Development is willing to continue operating it for an additional 30 days. So they're able to keep it going through January with financial support. So the financial ask is $40,000 to cover their operating costs. They are not able to continue organizationally supporting it beyond January 31st. The idea of extending it is to gain some time to identify another operator. It would be handled as a change in ownership, not as a new center. So Southwestern has offered to convey the furnishings and et cetera, the items within the center to try to help the new operator come on board as easily as possible, help with transferring enrollment, potential opportunity for staff. There are 11 staff at that center currently, including the director, potential for them to be employed by a new operator. And because it's change in ownership, that's like a specific term from the state where a license is actually transferred from one provider to another provider. It's a short runway for trying to make that transition, but it's longer than it would have been if the program were to close as of December 31st. It would actually be a little sooner than that because of the school's holiday schedule. Buncombe County government and Buncombe County schools will work together on that. There are some behind the scenes kind of background conversations happening now, and I see Buncombe Partnership for Children represented in the room. They've got their ongoing deep relationships with providers in the field, so finding out who's out there that might have capacity to run another center. Another portion that I just want to flag that we can circle back to, not part of what this letter requested, but the committee may want to consider earmarking some funding for a transition fund to help another provider get established and up to speed, given that some of those startup pieces have delays before other revenue. We have 129,000 and change in our, I'll call it contingency fund for lack of a better shorthand term. That was the money that was rolled forward, but we didn't grant yet. So it's already allocated into the fund, meaning we would not need to go to the Board of Commissioners for an action asking for a budget for any allocations or grants up to 129,000. Additionally, because Southwestern was an applicant, this is me being your government employee telling about process. They're already an applicant, so they've participated in the competitive process. So we have the ability to make a grant as part of our procurement process. We wouldn't have to take any other steps. If the committee voted to approve any amount of funding up to that 40,000, we could get back to work later today and be working on that contract to carry it forward through January 31.
Well, thank you for, Rachel put in very clear, concise terms, something that has been kind of a firestorm issue for us since last week, and trying to do the best that we can to find out where we are, what runway we have. Certainly would love more lead time than a month, but I think we're working with what we've got in terms of a really unfortunate situation. Certainly the last to be impacted, since there was some hope as of I think as early as last meeting, that this was not going to be an issue for Buncombe County. So regrettable, but I think we have to make the best decision that we can for the students and the folks involved.
I make a motion that we grant $40,000.
Perfect. Have a motion? Is
I'll
there a
second it.
Excellent. Any discussion?
Question I have, what happens after January?
Rachel, correct me if I'm wrong, after January, we have, if we approve this, that would take us from 129 down to 89,000. That leaves us at least 89,000 to figure out who's going to fill in that next gap. We're being left with some pretty good infrastructure, but don't have anyone who's immediately able to step up to the plate yet. So kind of my next ask in this meeting would be, please extend your circles, ask folks, make sure we do the most transparent process, but hopefully someone's willing to step up to the plate and help us mitigate our damages here.
The best case scenario, Commissioner, would be that Buncombe County Schools and Buncombe County government are able to work out a process, probably not a full RFP, something that's gonna be really extensive, but a call for interested partners to express their interest. We reach out to all of those irons that are in the fire kind of informally, get a list of potentials and work that list to see if any would be able to be operating as of February 1. Speed would not be the only factor we want to take into consideration, and try to minimize any gap where those slots are not available.
This is a concern I have. We're talking about less than 2 months.
Yeah.
There were a lot of different options discussed, including would it be possible for the current provider to stay through the end of the school year?
Right.
And Southwestern is simply not in a position to do that. They're board voted 30 days. Or I guess it would be 30.
Are there staff members that can, and I know they're leaving all the equipment, can we take their staff, existing staff too, or was that part of the issue?
There are 11 employees, and so there's a potential for them to be invited to work.
I mean, that's a huge differentiator. That's a positive, because if staffing was the issue, then I'd say, well, maybe I'll take back my motion. But if there's staff, I think it would be great. I don't want to lose those slots. I really don't.
No, I agree with you. We don't want to lose the slots. I want to see us keep them there. That's my concern.
It's too soon for me to give a guess about, or tell you my level of confidence that we could get it done by February 1st. We'll sure put our energy in that direction.
That's it.
Could you explain a little bit more about this thought you had about the funds also for making the transition? Because I'd like to know, you've got 40 to get us to February 1,
Mm-hmm.
but then what would those funds look like? And I think we're setting a precedence here that we need to be very conscientious about.
Mm-hmm.
There are a lot of centers that go through these changes all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And before we know it, a lot of folks are going to be saying, can you help me get through my transition?
Mm-hmm.
I think I understand the need for it, I think, but I'd like to know a little bit more about why and how.
Certainly, we're mindful of the precedent that would be set by doing an emergency grant. When commissioners were advocating for the switch for this to become a fund, a multi-year fund, so that money doesn't roll away, one of the ideas was, would that give us the flexibility to do emergency support? We hadn't built a structure, and so this maybe gives us a way to test that, but for better or for worse, it does set a precedent, so that's something we want to think about with your vote. As far as the transition fund, the $40,000 is what we're hearing from their interim executive director would cover their direct costs for a month of operating, payroll, food, utilities, etc. Theoretically, the new provider, by giving ownership of the existing license would be able to retain and have subsidy income at the beginning. If there's no loss of enrollment. So if all 34 children that are on childcare subsidy stayed and switched, enrolled from whatever that switch mechanically looks like, I don't really know, but then their subsidy, this new provider could have income, revenue for those slots. Southwestern is telling us that rate isn't enough to cover the
That's what I was
cost.
gonna say, this is how Southwestern, so many struggle with the subsidy.
Private pay, they'll need to establish what their private pay rate is.
Right.
The private pay rate at Southwestern has been lower than what we see at some of the others. And so I don't want to paint the picture that after a transition, a new provider would be able to cover all their costs.
Right.
Because that's why this fund exists. There are gaps regardless.
Exactly.
We're supporting early childhood centers with operating costs. But that gap is going to be harder for a provider at the beginning. And if there was the ability to provide financial support, I haven't done the math on it, would it make that short list of vendors more likely to be interested?
What's their fiscal
Probably
year?
would.
You know, right now?
Don't know.
So is it fair to say that they're booking a loss of $40,000 a month based on this ask?
No, and I haven't been through their financials. It's not a currently funded grantee. For the first time in 10 years, they haven't had a county grant. It's not the only reason they're in a financial predicament. It's that whole regional thing. However, I don't have their financials. They've been pretty open and willing to share. So over the phone telling me the costs of different things. What I know is that Southwestern, the nonprofit organization operating Valley, has been heavily subsidizing the Valley. So $40,000, I think, is the total cost to run the program per month. And I don't know how much is covered by subsidy and private pay.
I had a question. Are they currently receiving stabilization funds, and will those transfer with a transfer in ownership?
I will write that question down as
Good
some
question.
information to gather, but I don't have that answer at this time.
And regardless of any vote, if y'all have any questions, please feel free to send them to Angela and Rachel, but and me as well, and the educational, as we're figuring out what the next steps are here to have the full landscape for how to navigate a situation that we have very little information on. But for me, one of the big factors, and I do want to give a special thanks to Rachel for immediately jumping on this, being responsive, reaching out to an ungodly number of people leading into a weekend, trying to get us something tangible. This is our last meeting before we'd be at a time where we're in crisis period in January, so I don't like proceeding without all the questions answered, but I do want to give our staff the discretion after we vote on it, of course. When I hear 40 students and 34 on subsidy, that is a really unique emergent circumstance in my mind and caused me a lot of panic over the past 2 days. So anything we can do to look after the kids and make that a priority is kind of what's on my mind, but certainly when there are other folks' thoughts.
And what are the Buncombe schools willing to do, or is there a way we can get into a more active partnership with them with that program somehow?
Well, thankfully, we have someone here.
I know, that's why I'm sort of
Not to
looking
pick on the
back here.
spot, but
I'm
everything
not
you say is
sure.
firmly committed.
I mean, how? I
So
guess.
the Buncombe County Schools arrangement currently is essentially the landlord sort of relationship, offering the space on an in-kind basis, which makes a big difference certainly to the financials, as well as there are some other components, I think. I don't know if Jennifer's prepared to speak to this or not, but janitorial, food service, there are some pieces that are done in collaboration.
I mean, I believe that's happened for years and years and years.
What's that?
Since they went there.
Because this is at the community school, right?
Right.
Can't,
It's at community high school.
right, right.
From my understanding, there's separate utility and water and all of those hookups, so the provider pays their own utility bills. They pay for food service, but it's through a partnership with the schools because there's already food service on campus. I'm getting nods.
I'm happy to speak for it.
I've not heard that Fulton County Schools is in a position to offer any financial support.
Well, is there more that can be done from an in-kind perspective then? I mean, there's financial and y'all are doing some in-kind. Is there more that might be able to be forthcoming to?
I would have to dig into some details to better answer that question. I think the in-kind that we're offering now is substantial with the facility use, custodial, but to dig into the details, I have to look a little bit more closely. If we were given a little bit more time past January, I think too, we could think about a heavier involvement even on the operational end of things from Buncombe County Schools. But January 31st gives us very little time.
I think if we're trying to cobble together a partnership, it would be great among schools would be seen as a, key partner, not just a landlord, but, we're all working together to try to make this happen.
Sure.
Approach.
Well, if we lose those staff members, it becomes a whole different thing. And if we lose the parents, I mean, I don't know where they go, but
There's some spots in Black Mountain on some of those sites, but.
Is the vote, to approve the $40,000 or not, or is it is the vote like to potentially approve $80,000 and continue this through February? Because,
Southwestern is not in a position to offer anything past January 31st.
So right now, and I hate boxing people in a corner, but it's really just 40,000 or nothing, keeping them in the game through at least January while we master the next phase of the plan. I don't know what communication has to look like, and Mr. Fruit, please correct me if I'm wrong. If we need some kind of working committee to continue to explore this and communicate, as we have a lot of moving parts between Buncombe County Schools and putting out RFPs, certainly want to keep everyone involved, but do we need to designate a committee to talk about this as we have real-time decisions, or is that something?
That might be a good idea. If the board is going to empower, say, 3 people on this side of the room to do these negotiations or to approve anything in the short term before this board meets again, yes, it would have to be done in that fashion.
So my thought is, if we can, I guess, resolve the pending vote, that motion that Kit put forward on 40,000, and then pivot to anyone who's willing to volunteer between now and the busiest time of year for most people, a few hours or however many emails it takes to help us sort this out in practice, get the questions answered, and just be very deliberate about what our communications with Buncombe County Schools and our other partners look like. That would be my next suggestion. But as to just the vote for now, any further discussion?
I have a clarifying question.
Yes.
So if the committee decides to grant the $40,000 for the month of January, and they aren't able to find a provider to step in, what happens February 1?
I think part of that we'd be able to address in our January meeting if we have one.
I mean, the 40,000 is for January, not for February. So that wouldn't be contingent that Southwestern find a provider. It would be to extend their.
I was just wondering about like the state of the facility.
Yeah, so there's ownership of the items. So we'll be getting legal consultation on how to transfer that ownership. I guess it would be vacant. I'm hoping that if we do not hit February 1st with a new provider, that we've got another date that we've identified so that it's a gap to something as opposed to just uncertain.
I think that was my question.
There's a solution, but it's not necessarily on February 1. Is that what
There's a
you're
lot
saying?
that's not known, but yes, that's what I'm getting at.
And the other thing I was thinking of with the staffing is if you were able to find a provider to step in and could carry over the staff, that's fantastic. And with all the uncertainty in a very short timeline with staffing, you know, folks will need to figure out their next steps and have a short time to do that, so.
I wonder on that just very specific point, if we can be particularly proactive in terms of transition planning, if there is a scenario where there's not sustainability for this model and there are in fact 11 licensed or qualified staff looking for positions, we know there are people looking to hire right away, so maybe that's one thing we can just flag as this process moves forward, that maybe helping with placement for those people who want to continue in the field if we do get to that scenario.
Indeed, and Buncombe Partnership for Children would be prepared to help with placement in addition to Southwestern for children as needed, not to say that there's always going to be
Because that could be, I mean,
an ideal spot for each person.
right, I mean, just very briefly, I do think there's a very legitimate argument for this being a role we play in the community is helping to support capacity related to transitions, whether that means, you know, one program taking over another, or if there's a program closure, how families and staff can land. You know, as we think about the fragility of the overall ecosystem, those transition points are so critical, and I think if we can bring to bear sort of rapid response resources in those moments, I think that's one way we can help support sustaining the slots that we have and the staffing issues we know are out there. So, you know, just in summary, I think we should lean in this moment and moments like this, and you know, be strategic and thoughtful, not and respond to requests where we're able to, or help support grantees like the partnership being able to lean in with resources they have. So that's kind of where I land on it. I would support the motion.
We've talked about slot preservation and it's certainly that, it's a risk, but it's to me, a low risk type of risk. Because the fact is, there would be families and staff and children who'd be cared for another month. If it doesn't work out, it doesn't work out. And that would be, it would be a shame. And I know it's really short, but I just think it's, I mean, if not this group, who? It's not like you could go to a bank and get a loan for this kind of coverage. And so I feel like, and got the dollars that exist. I think this is worth the additional month's investigation of how we could potentially help make a match and preserve the role. And if it doesn't work, then we've tried. And in terms of precedent setting, if it doesn't work, it's not gonna be a precedent we're gonna follow. At least in my estimation.
I agree.
There's another part that I guess I keep thinking about is, you know, if it's not gonna work out, it still buys us a month. And as Jasmine was saying, there's staff members, and we know that places need employees. Then there are slots that are unfilled. So sort of the backup, if no one does step up to the plate, is for us to then see, you know, where these different staff members.
We don't lose
and
it to
kids
a
can
fast
land.
food restaurant or you know, not that there's anything wrong with that, but I agree. I mean,
These folks are qualified, we all.
if we can retain them for the industry,
Yeah.
that's still,
We
that's a
need
good thing.
Need them.
Well, I don't hear a ton of opposition, so with that in mind, all in favor? Any opposed? Fantastic. So we will take next steps on that, just as one procedural matter to always make sure we're following the law. Would anyone like to serve in a committee role? I'd love to be a part of that, but certainly want subject matter experts in this with me. But just in our communications as we go forward with BCS and all partners that we're gonna solicit information from. Anyone willing to jump into another free endeavor?
Maybe others, but I'll help if.
I'll also be a part of it.
I'm super busy right now, but I'd like to be kept on the email list around it. And I live out there. I don't know that it would help at all in physical proximity, but I am out there. So over the holidays, something. Thank you.
I hear you're good on holiday desserts. Staff could use a chair of.
Maybe so.
Fantastic.
Before we move on, take the group's temperature on funds for transition.
Yes. Do we need to vote on that committee though?
Yes.
Okay.
I'll move that we form that committee for this express purpose of navigating the situation. Members being, let me try to have everyone's name here. Kit, in reverse order here, not in order of importance. But Kit, Leslie, Mark, and myself.
Second.
Well, any discussion? If not, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Excellent, thank you. And we'll certainly keep everyone in the loop at every major juncture here. Really just give us some nimbleness to respond and get this done in advance of January if possible, or at least no later than our next committee meeting.
Does this committee meet in January?
I think it's the, oh, maybe we don't.
It does now.
The second. Oh, I'm looking at staff, that's the roadmap we need.
See if we have it posted.
Do we have any more surprises out there?
Not as good as this.
I wanted to, the reason I was speaking quietly to our committee chair to my left is I wanted to get the group's temperature. We could vote on this as well if there was appetite for it, on putting any funding over and above the 40 into transition, so funding available for the new provider. We're going to be having conversations in the next few weeks to gauge provider interest. And so waiting until January to know that answer will be tough.
So what's the number again? How much is it?
It'd be 80,000 left.
89,000.
89?
89 left.
Yeah, I'm not proposing a specific dollar amount.
I like having a risk fund, a relative risk fund.
Is the risk fund specifically for this center, or are we just saying that is the vote to establish a risk fund? Or is there a vote to earmark a specific amount for this center for the transition?
I was thinking more specifically about this particular opportunity when we go to provider A and they're gauging whether or not this is something they could take on, knowing that they could have some financial support up to a certain amount, would be really, I feel like pivotal.
I'm not offer it though.
No.
I mean, I just wonder if we should maintain flexibility in the use of those funds, because we don't know what's gonna come. I mean, we may have somebody who wants to do it, and if we say we've got extra money, they'll say, please, may I have some more? And I'm not sure that's not what I was thinking. I was just thinking I like having flexible money, that if I mean, this was a crisis that we didn't think we were facing because we heard Buckham wasn't going to be affected.
And right now, what do we term this fund that we did have 129?
Fund balance.
Just the fund balance?
So
Essentially, because like,
It's in the 327 with this, it's in 224.
So I see it in two potential categories, right? I'm perfectly okay with the idea of having a fund that we use for emergency purposes, and this has certainly given rise to a discussion about why such a thing is important. And then also, the separate track that kind of overlaps with this is addressing the community need that's coming of these 34 of particular importance slots that we're now dealing with. So for this immediate consideration, I'm thinking that community need being met, but I do see a lot of value in us having a fund, because we are so uncertain right now for so many reasons at local and state level about funding, that it makes a lot of sense to have a fund for whatever Fund 2024 will bring us not to be a pessimist, but just realistic about how important it's going to be, and we're gonna have these transitional issues if we're being completely candid about the state of education right now.
That's true.
So it sounds like if there is a financial request from the incoming provider, we can acknowledge that there may be some capacity for the committee to respond to that, and our next meeting is on December, or January 2nd. And we can bring something like that, rather than have a certain number.
That sounds good.
Al, what do you think?
Hmm?
What do you think?
If I was against it, I would let you know, you know that.
You mean about the fund balance?
About the fund balance piece? What do you think? I mean, I don't wanna advertise that we've got,
Oh, no, I'm be careful how we advertise, because everybody,
Public
it's
meeting.
tight now for everybody. And what it sounds like a lot, but 89,000 would be gone quick.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I think what we're doing with this, you know,
Would it be helpful to authorize the subcommittee to have some leeway
Yeah.
to make emergency
Yes.
decisions
Right.
over the holidays
Like
or
that.
the next meeting?
Did the motion cover that emergency
I
fund? or
like
did it
that,
settle it?
you're right.
I don't think so. I don't think you were that specific.
Okay, well, I will offer a new motion, I'm just gonna set a record today, to vest that same committee with the authority to make those decisions for emergency spending power of the contingency fund. With left 89,000, I guess, after the 40,000 approval. Invite a second from anyone.
Who seconded it?
Me, I'll second it.
Okay.
Thank you, Jasmine.
Yeah.
Any discussion? And I think we're right, it's a public meeting, but we do want to be very deliberate about our advertising. This is not an invitation to give us the highest bill.
That's right.
Yeah, that's the thing.
yeah,
We want to meet
anything
the
would be
community.
scrutinized in terms of what the cost would be.
That would be my contribution is that we feel very reactionary, or at least I feel very reactionary in this discussion, and that considering what's been presented, that there be some movement around putting structure for future requests such as this. And that could be part of future meetings that we have in the interim from the actual formal cycle. But it does give me some discomfort of the timing. Not that the need's not important, but the timing of the request and the amount of information that's available to make the decision isn't as thorough as other applications that we've reviewed.
And I think you're right. I really appreciate that. It sets kind of a new tone in my mind for what questions we're asking when we give out our grants for next year. Not to say, accuse anyone of any kind of being anything less than straightforward. We get it. It's really difficult right now, but definitely am more acutely aware of how sensitive these situations are and how everyone seems to be on the brink of one paycheck away, as most of us are dealing with. So that's true in the education space too.
I really am interested in understanding what happened overall. I mean, I'm curious, but I'm also, is it a cautionary tale? Is it, I'm just interested.
We're gonna find out.
Yeah.
Sorry if you want to time off, Rachel. If there's no objection, all in favor of the authority motion, say aye. Any opposed? Excellent. Thank you all for being nimble. I really appreciate this. I think it's an important one for us to discuss, even though it took a little bit longer. But I think it was critical for us to get some guidance today. Anything else on that topic? Thank you, Rachel. On to old business. Looking at committee membership, I believe we still have one vacancy. Rachel's pulling up some data about that right now. Thank you. And just want to take a moment and reflect on our demographic, making sure that we have a committee that is reflective of our entire community and just be acutely aware of where we stand here. So see on up there, I won't present your project, it's fun. So you can see we have a pretty healthy split between, dear God, I'm now in 35 category. 35 to 54.
I'm crying so many tears. Welcome, Martin.
Yeah, we gotta stop her.
I'm about to age out of a couple young groups. So about half and half between 35 to 54 and 55 plus. I think that's great, reflective of healthy diversity of age range here. More female than male, self-identified. We have by race demographics, kind of speaks for itself there. So certainly encourage all friends, make sure our community is being brought in here. I get that there's some element of these boards and commissions always being difficult because it's in the middle of the day, unfortunately. Makes it difficult for some folks to participate. It is unpaid to the best of my knowledge. Someone tell me if I'm wrong on that. But whatever we can do, we'll talk to our teams here about how we've improved diversity practices around making sure we're recruiting from all parts of our community, so we remain reflective. But I don't think it's for lack of effort. We had a very aggressive campaign to get folks to apply, and did not get the number of applications we were hoping for, but I'm very proud of the folks that we were able to recruit, and very thankful for everyone who's willing to serve. But it's no small commitment in the middle of the day on Tuesday. So if anyone has strategies, please share them. I'm open-minded about however we keep those numbers headed the direction that Buncombe's been committed to. As far as zip codes, I think we have pretty good geographic representation. We don't have a huge board, blind share folks being from 28803 and 28804.
And by the way, I moved, so
Thanks for throwing off our numbers.
one of the zip codes not represented is now represented.
Right, are you ready?
28778.
Perfect. Does that give us all the zip codes in Buncombe at this point?
There's a list of zip codes now.
Oh, there. Oh, there you go. I should have just looked further down. That's a really interesting distinction. Kind of interesting given our commission demographics, right? We have 3 districts, but then a lot of those zip codes fall in roughly the same area for our purposes.
So non-Asheville.
Well, good. That kind of informs our strategy about where we can consider reaching out.
Yeah, I was 03, so that's a 5, so that helps. Move it out a little bit.
Well, if you have any friends in Sandy Mush or Fairview, Fletcher, please let them know. Any other high-level takeaways, Rachel? This is mostly just for everyone's edification, making sure we're staying true to our goal here of being.
I'd like to get another mail.
Yeah, Angela, who was on the nominating subgroup? Under 35, male, Latinx, from a rural area. Those are attributes that use more representation in the room. BIPOC maybe in general.
If there's anything we can do to recruit some folks who might be non-native English speakers.
Another perspective that we didn't have data for is looking at the areas of professions or skills or attributes, non-demographic.
Does that show up on our
Would be
application?
revealed through conversation, not through data.
I was gonna say. Well, we will be sending you all a survey at some point then, asking what you do for a living. But I think that would be helpful. I don't like serving on boards with multiple lawyers, so if nothing else, we can.
Nobody does.
I appreciate it, honestly.
You walked into that.
I just asked for that.
Any concerns, questions about that? If not, we'll follow up, and this might hit our agenda in the new year.
We have 1 open seat out of the 15. So if you know any great candidates, please encourage them to reach out to staff and we'll help them through the application process.
Thank you. All right, our next item is Workforce Development Series takeaways. There was a document that went out for that one, if you pulled it up.
Sorry, it's so small.
For those following along, it's also on the website. Feel free to pull it up on Buncombe County's main page. Anything else on this one?
This dovetails into the next agenda item, which is under new business. At the request of committee at the last meeting, staff put together a document that summarized the activities that occurred during the workforce development series and tried to call out what our takeaways were. So it's not necessarily a report, maybe more of a summary. As an additional follow-up to this, we are encouraging the committee to consider listing workforce development as a top priority for the fund in the next grant-making cycle. This is me going from that old business item to the new business item. I don't have any additional information to share about the takeaways, but would answer the questions that the committee has. So taking that moment of privilege, the person who's screen sharing, if you would pull up the draft grant guidelines. I think it's the others. This is a document that we put out each year. It's pretty dense and full of all the A to Z information. If you've ever applied for a federal grant and seen and noticed a funding opportunity, this is kind of that. How much money, what's the eligibility criteria, what's the application process, A to Z. We will need to update the funding figure to back out the carry forward funds that are already committed. This remains largely the same as last year. When you scroll to the eligibility criteria, and then I guess past that to strategies, which is on the top of the second page, those are the same strategies that were previously in the fund, and we're suggesting an edit which called out workforce development as the top priority of the fund at this time, including activities to support recruitment, growth, and retention of teachers and staff. And states further that this committee recognizes the importance of a robust, diverse, and well-qualified workforce as fundamental to an effective system of early care and education. So the way that we're proposing that, it's not exclusive. And certainly workforce development strategies might show up in lots of different types of projects, but it's really taking those takeaways from the learning series and articulating them in this application. We are not proposing additional changes from the staff side, except for a couple things on the timeline when how we work with applicants. We are working together on an in-person open house kind of fair event for applicants to go along with those grant consultations that we do with applicants as they develop their applications. The deadline would be February 9th for proposals to be submitted. When you think back to our first conversation on the agenda today, that means in theory, if there was everything falling into place fast enough, the new operator of Southwest of Valley Child could submit an FY25 proposal because they would know before that deadline that they were applying. Still really tight. So February 9th, when we select that date, we try to maximize the time that grantees have to work on their proposals and also maximize the time that you all have to look at the proposals and score them. So managing that balance, you all would get off and running on that scoring by February 12th and continue through the work until the end of April when the recommendations get submitted to the county budget office. We have not made any adjustments in the draft application questions or scoring criteria. This was all in your packet sent to you last week. I don't know if this is something that requires a vote. I don't What it does, I think we voted on it in previous years.
When you say, right, you mean all the materials or?
To approve the materials.
Okay, I do have a question when you're ready for it.
Ready for questions?
As some folks know, one of the things I've had a particular interest in through this granting process is what our applicants tell us about the question related to results. So what results are you intending to get? And then what are your indicators so that you know whether you're achieving those results? And then to report throughout the year and then subsequent years if you're funded for more than 1 year about how these results are taking place. So one thing that I did, because you gave us all the materials today, which I was really glad for, was to look at what's the message we're giving applicants regarding this one point. And I have a bias because I think our children and our staff and our workforce deserve top quality projects if we can, to the extent we can get them. And so when I looked at on page 3, what are we saying in the application to potential applicants for results number 11, page 3, that's the statement there. I think this is the same as it was last year, if I remember. And then if you go to the instructions for the proposal on the front page, it says scoring will be based on the following criteria: proposed results, dash impact on selected strategy. And then there's a third spot on page 3 of these instructions, which is the same as what was in the other document. So my concern is that as you read, as an applicant reads this question, it says, what results do you hope to achieve with this project? Explain how you will measure the results, including any specific measures you will track, if this request is for renewal funding, and so forth. To me, this question is weak. It doesn't feel very straightforward and very intentional about what the applicant is telling us they will do with, in some cases, quite a bit of money. So to me, the question, what results do you hope to achieve? I would say a better question, and there probably are other ones, what results do you intend to achieve?
Sure.
Hope is hoping, but this needs to be very intentional about what you intend to do with the taxpayers' money. And then in the second sentence, explain how you will measure the results, including any specific measures you will track. And that implies any specific measures, does not say the measures you will track. If you say any measures you will track, they may say, well, I don't want to track any. So I'm not being told I have to include any specific measures, but any. So I would ask that we give some serious consideration to the intentions around this question and what message we're telling the applicants as they are considering whether they really want to be held accountable for what we're asking them, what they're asking us for the funds. I knew there was a third space, and on this, a third place where this is, I think, also confusing is on page 5, where we talk about the review process. It says proposed results, and here it says project includes quantifiable results and a plan for measuring success. Mm-hmm. That's different. So we have 3 different messages about what I think is probably the most important question on the application.
Any concerns from others switching hope to intend and any to the on the question? part. I think that would make it stronger.
I think so too.
And proposed results is one of the scoring, one of the 6 items that an application can be scored. And we've described incomplete, insufficient, adequate, good, and excellent, and written out a description for each one. The description of incomplete would be little to no description of results or ways to measure performance of the project. And then excellent, to get the full 5 points on that, would be that it's tiny. The proposed results are clearly described, likely to have a high impact, in alignment with goals of the grant funders, including specific measures and methods for effectively measuring results of the funded project. And if applicable, excellent previous results track record, because some are new to the fund and some are renewal. So in our coaching, during those calls and the applicant house, we can try to make sure that applicants are really looking at those specific criteria that committee needs.
I think helping them understand that they need to choose some indicators that they want to track, which in this description, it says that. What are the results and how are you gonna actually measure your success? Most of them just regurgitate, here's what I did for my project. And we've already heard that in the rest of the proposal, but they're not saying, here's the different, we said we wanted to make this change, and this is how far we got. And I think it should be the same language, wherever that question is referenced, it should be the same language all the way across. Because they may read this question and, this statement and not read the other statement and make assumptions. If you take the one that seems the easiest. So, the first one here, impact on selected strategy. That's kind of what you were saying, I guess, the impact over that scale. But maybe, that needs to be described if we're going to talk in terms of impact. What do we consider impact?
In some of our other grant applications for proposed results, we specifically or explicitly ask for proposed data that they might be able to track.
Yes, that's what I'm talking about, indicator.
Yeah, and I think that language is more clear in the expectation, so
yes,
we can tweak that.
Yes, that's a good point, yes.
So proposed new language would say something to the effect of, this is in the application question. What results do you intend to achieve with this project? Explain how you will measure the results, including specific data and measures you will track.
Explain how you will measure, including specific data and measures.
Specific, yep.
Take out any
and substitute the specific data measures.
Can you read it out again?
Yep. So what results do you intend to achieve with this project? Explain how you will measure the results, including the specific data and measures you will track.
With the second part there, if this is a request for renewal funding, describe your actual project results achieved. Should we have some sort of parallel language relative to looking back at a previous year?
Using specific
Like
data
the data
measures.
measures, give us the data and measures that you proposed before and tell us how well you did, kind of idea. This is sloppy language, but I think you get the point. Just ask them to be accountable for what they said they were going to do. And I think, again, using the same language will help people fill it out, but also help us be able to evaluate it. I don't know how we do that unless we've got some consistency.
Yeah, and we know that it's extra work to have to click over to the website and get their published reports,
Right.
which is why we wanted them to summarize the previous results here as well. Because
Yes,
we're already in the application,
right.
and know that it's backed up with the numbers in their monthly, or in their quarterly reports that are published.
Right. I mean, for us to go back to 20 previous projects and try to square them up while we're also evaluating this,
Let's take
it's
it.
just too much, frankly.
Great,
I mean,
thanks.
as motivated as I am, it's hard for me to do.
Thank you for those suggestions. I think we've got them captured.
I had a question, I'm sorry. I noticed that we asked for information regarding sustainability, but then it doesn't get tied back to the scoring or to results.
Good notice.
And I don't know what experience you've had in terms of the types of projects that have come forward and been approved, in terms of whether there are projects out there that are actually sustainable because of the environment we're in.
Yeah.
So I don't have the history that all of you have, so I just wondered if that's something worthwhile to discuss, or whether it's been hashed plenty of times already.
It's a keen observation, and the theme of sustainability is one we've talked about a lot and continue to talk about a lot, because from one line of thinking, grant funding can be a bridge to help an organization to then be able to carry the work forward when the grant funding is gone. And we're operating within an environment where there's a shortage of enough funds to cover the operational needs, particularly for the grantees that are running centers or classrooms. And so for that reason, it remained on the question list, so we can keep it prioritized as a conversation element, but not hold it for or against an organization in the actual scoring and deciding which to.
Yeah, that's helpful.
Rachel, that sort of brings back to me, the ad hoc committee we had back in summer around multi-year grants. And how do we want to view multi-year grants, which is that piece. Do we want, do we want to limit the number of multi-year grants? And again, that all ties back into the sustainability pieces you just mentioned. Felt like when we talked about it as a committee, we sort of kicked the can down the road and didn't really deal with how we want to view multi-year grants. And I'm happy to keep kicking it down the road if we need to.
Part of it was to wait and see if the early childhood pilot project to expand accessibility in NC 211, NC pre-K would get funded, because that would be another big chunk, like how overcommitted we would be as a portfolio. This application proposes no changes to multi-year funding. It leaves a question, same question that was on there previously. Item 5 on the question list. If you would like it to be considered for multi-year, how much and what would your milestones be essentially?
And as I recall, one of the concerns we all had was that if we do too many multi-year grants, it limits the flexibility to fund new projects. And so, as I recall, we talked a little about, do we put a cap on the amount of that can be multi-year funded each year? And again, that was sort of the discussion was around get down the road. And so we're down the road now. Well, I guess we have until anyway.
Last year, did we approve multi-year funding projects?
No, I don't think we added any. It ends up being this task that comes after all of the allocating of the annual. Now do we want to do some multi-year? And it doesn't feel like the committee has hit its stride with how to handle that. It's kind of mushy.
There's also Tetris of multi-year funded projects being carried forward into the year that we're discussing and yeah, complicated.
You know, I think so much of it will depend on what kind of project is presented. It's hard to make a huge difference in 1 year, depending upon what you're trying to do. We've got some grants and I'm thinking 1 year and showing meaningful results is hard. So I don't know, I'm kind of ambivalent about it. Maybe I don't think I was on the committee either, but I'm into can kicking in this particular case.
I had a question about on the, I guess it's the scoring, and that was my first year participating in that scoring process, but there was a question of do you recommend funding yes or no? But I don't recall us using that when talking through the cutoff and how, there were some projects that met that threshold if you drew a red line of saying funding based off of the quantitative score, but then the yes or no count didn't get considered for the project. And so I just wonder if there is value in keeping that question if we're not going to use that, or if we want to continue to have that as a potential criteria that's used.
Did the staff use it?
No, so year before last, you guys used it because you did it was a percentage of like their overall score plus the percent that recommended it got calculated together. But then this year you decided after that, which university you decided that wasn't helpful for you the year before, so we did not use it.
Yeah, for those of you who have been around,
Take it
you might
off
remember some, like the composite score thing that we tried. Is there anyone that would be sad to see that question go?
The yes, no?
I do my own yes, no. I don't know about y'all, but I, do my spreadsheet and indicate which ones I feel really strongly about and which ones, I kind of have 3 tiers. It's not a yes or no. It's a yes, it's a maybe, and it's a no.
Yeah.
For me. But that was kind of to keep my mind organized around it.
What do you think? You think it should be there or not?
Well, if we're not planning to use it,
Okay.
I'd say
There you go.
take it off.
No.
But if folks wanted the potential to use it to see how it fares out, then I could see leaving it there. I just distinctly recall there was one project that was like half the group said do not fund. There's a recommendation that I got funded.
Oh, yeah. I remember that.
Well, as you all think on this, just gonna put the public comment sign up here, so we allow the appropriate time.
There's one.
Oh, go. Empty too. Any other thoughts about?
I guess the other question on the yes, no is, can it work as a tiebreaker if it's there?
I feel like
Because
you
it
looked
just,
at it
to your
earlier,
point,
yeah.
Carol, that if it, it seemed like it had good scores, but that a lot of people were hesitant about funding it. That if another one had a similar score, say, okay, that's,
It might shuffle the deck. You're
right,
saying.
that's sort of the tiebreaker.
I don't see any, Carol, that were recommended at half that still got funded. So I'll just follow up with you later to take a look at that.
Yeah, maybe it wasn't half, it was.
Close to
Like, no, that's not, that's anecdotal.
The other option is instead of making it part of the evaluation process, like the yes, no, recommended funding, there is the comment box. So if you feel strongly about, yes, I would highly recommend funding this project, you could always include it there, and that's all, we download all of that information.
When we come back and coach you all and prep you to do your scoring, we're gonna highly encourage you all to use the comments. It helps us remember what the conversation was when we're looking at a year later? Why did the committee go in this direction? It also really helps the grantees. They ask for copies of their scores, and when there are comments and questions, it helps them better understand where the committee members were coming from when they scored that. So let's table that. We'll go back and look and see how we used it. Maybe if it's not adding value, we can pull it out. This is set to open
December 18th.
Thank you. December 18th. So we will adjust those questions that we discussed today and take a look at the yes, no question. Not sure if it's in the grant guideline or not. And we'll pick the conversation back up when we meet January.
Rachel, were there any changes to the instructions relative to the budgets?
No, I don't believe so.
I think we talked about this after we finished the process when we did our sort of debrief. It's still difficult at times to compare projects because folks are not filling out the budgets in the same fashion. There's some that are not showing any support for their project from themselves, not staff time, not, space at all. I mean, it's like, we are the sole funder of this. And somehow I think there needs to be better coaching on how to fill that out so it's to their advantage. If a project comes in and they're asking for $180,000 and you look at their budget and there's no revenue coming in from the applicant, maybe that's okay with them. But maybe it would be good to help them understand how to show some of their investment. That's just one example I remember. But I found it's less now than it used to be, but there's still a wide variation over how people fill it out.
Got it. We'll add that as an area to emphasize with the applicants.
And just to be sure, because it's been some time, is it the budget for the specific project?
Right.
Or is it their overall operating budget?
It's for the project, and it's all according to the difference that makes it hard to compare across is that organizations don't always take the same interpretation of how to define a project. Is it a program? And very large organizations or smaller organizations, they define it differently, but what we're asking for is full revenue and expense for the project, and then just your summary for your overall organization budget, not itemized, so we can see how the project ties to the scale or scope of the operating organization.
And do they understand that they're just doing it they're doing a budget simply for what they are asking us to fund, not their whole organization? This is, again, where the confusion.
But if it's quite small, they might not see a difference between project and overall organization. If it's quite large and there's different departments and cost centers and programs, then they'll naturally have project breakouts.
Yeah, I guess it does show us whether we're a major funder for a whole organization.
Yeah.
And we're in the operations business.
Yeah.
We're in the childcare business, if that's the case.
Thank you, everyone.
It's gonna give me a rash just thinking about this. And I don't know about y'all, and it seems like I have a bunch of them from a couple of different organizations that I have to review at the same time. Ugh.
We appreciate your service.
Yeah.
Very personal answer. Well, if anyone has any additional thoughts, please feel free to share them. I think this is going to be a continued thought process, maybe put on another agenda meeting before we hit February, just to revisit and see if y'all's brains work better in the morning like mine does, but.
When does it go out to the calendar?
It'll go out before we meet next. The yes,
Okay.
no, maybe question isn't, I don't think it's listed on the
It's not.
So we can
It's not.
table that one.
Yeah, I think that's actually, I think, now that we've talked about it, I've thought about it, I honestly do like a 3 answer rather than a 2 answer. And I'm glad we don't have anything for them to fill, it's not for them to fill out anyway. Put it on the score sheet, if everybody uses it, great, then we can use it. If not, that's fine too. I'm gonna do it that way, I can tell you.
That works. All right, any announcements? Well, if Rachel has none, I don't know who else would.
Rachel, do we want to ask about the volunteers for the grants fair?
Please.
So this year we are hosting a community investment grants open house for all of the county's community investment grant programs instead of doing the individual virtual grant writing workshops like we usually do. It's going to be an in-person event where we're inviting all the community-based organizations that you can think of and then some to come and attend at their leisure. It's going to be January 10th from 4 to 6 p.m. here in this building downstairs. And we're going to have tables for each of our grant programs that are staffed by county staff. But we would also love to have 1 or 2 people from each committee or review team attend if they'd like to help represent the grant program, meet applicants, potentially answer questions. So if that sounds like something that you're interested in, I'll let everybody look at their calendar since we haven't announced this before, but you can look at your calendars January 10th, 4 to 6, and you're interested in joining, feel free to shoot me and or Angela an email and we'll make sure you get the invite.
Sounds good. Thank you. Do we have any public comment? I don't think I saw anyone walk to the page, but in the interest of democracy. All right, well, I won't force you to speak. Our next meeting will be January 2nd, right into the new year, 132, 200 College Street. Make sure I tell us the right room. We're on the ground floor. So just in case you want to get confused, do not come here. Downstairs, and we'll start the new year. Push out, right at Big Hill. So. Any questions? If not, I'll move to adjourn.
Thank you.